Oh, well, hello there. Sorry I haven't scrubbed up. I mean, unfortunately my taffeta ball gown is in the wash, so I just had to put some scruffs on. But it's been a little while, but I have been buying a lot of new toys, and following on from our last videos, I've got one of them here to show you. And this is the Hornby LNER Class Q6 locomotive. It's running number 3418 in LNER livery, and its catalogue number is R3424. And by now we're pretty familiar with the Hornby packaging. On the back of this box, we've got a little bit about class history. Originally built as the Class T2 by the North Eastern Railway, designed by a gentleman by the name of Vincent Raven, later classified as the Class Q6 by the London and North Eastern Railway. Now these locomotives, they were built to really cope with increasing mineral traffic on the North Eastern Railway, and they followed on from the earlier Q5 design, and were incredibly successful. In fact, so successful, I think there's about 120 of them built, and they all lasted through to nationalisation. And indeed the first one was only withdrawn in, I believe it was 1960, and even then that was only due to an accident. All of the class had gone by 1967, so they were quite late lasters in terms of the end of steam, and one of these locomotives was saved for preservation. But we're going to open this up and take this out. Now, I usually talk to you a little bit about the little box of bits. Now, I couldn't help myself. I've actually been out and run this, and I've applied all the bits, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit because actually Hornby have made a little modification which I've not seen anybody talk about, much less me, but it became apparent with one of the previous models that we've reviewed, which I think was the B17, and that was, in days gone by, when trying to put the brake rigging underneath, the plastic that the brake shoes were moulded out of was really quite hard and unforgiving, and it meant that with a lot of locomotives, not just from Hornby, but from Bachmann and others too, it was really difficult to fit some of these extra bits and pieces. Not so with this and the B17. What I found when trying to apply the brake gear is that they've moulded some of the brake detail in a much more flexible plastic, and this actually made it a complete doddle to fit the brake gear in, and it's a marked contrast from some of the earlier models. We know the packaging off by heart now, so I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to lift this out, put that to one side. We do of course get in the box a nice detailed diagram of where all the goodies that were in the bag go, and you can see there telling you how to fit the brake gear, and it's these parts here they're in a much more flexible plastic, and I have to say that is really good development. But when we look at the locomotive here, we've got it in the London and North Eastern Railway livery, and it's a satin black, and black is a colour which I know it sounds a little bit silly, but can be badly done, but you know, it looks alright. I think the locomotive would probably benefit from a bit of weathering, because really they certainly didn't trundle around long looking this clean, and were probably pretty filthy most of the time. But we can see here, it's what livery there is superbly executed. Very crisp printing on the LNER on the tender and the 3418 on the locomotive. We've also got a very small builder's plate down here on I think that's a lubricator box or something like that. Same on both sides, and on the front, on the buffer beam, we've got the number, and there's nothing on the rear buffer beam. But if we turn it over, we can see here actually all the brake gear has been applied. Very easy this was for the reasons I stated before. But also, the other thing that Hornby have been doing, responding to criticism, and I think this really should be applauded, is we've got the permanent coupled screw fitted tender drawbar. There is a means to adjust it there. You can take this screw out and close couple them, but I'm going to leave it as is. But this drawbar does mean that that little plug down there, which connects the tender to the locomotive, doesn't get strained, and that was a big problem with some of their earlier locomotives that were joined together. We've got pretty free running wheels in the tender, and I do actually quite like the way that they're fitted in there, because it makes it very easy to lubricate. Probably not as easy to dismantle it, but I'm not really planning on doing that. We've got the couplings in NEM pockets, and I have to say that the NEM pocket at the front, whilst it looks quite an ugly beast when it's fitted like that, I've fitted it because I'm going to be using this locomotive running both forwards and backwards. But the whole pocket and assembly is actually a screw-on extra fitting from that bag of bits. And when it is fitted, it does cover up. There's a screw underneath there, which is one of the screws that you take off to get inside this model. There's actually quite a reasonable amount of detail on the underside of these locomotives, and it's something that's a little bit odd because you're never really going to see that in normal operation. We've got a representation of the little, almost like dumb buffers between the tender and the locomotive, and they're not sprung. I know we discussed on the Class 402 that they were, and I really wasn't quite sure why, but on this they haven't bothered with that. The buffers elsewhere, though, are sprung, so I'm just going to put that down, and we can see there that the buffers on the front and the back are sprung. We've got turned metal whistles, safety valves, and separately applied wire handrails. Now there is a line on. That is actually supposed to be there, and it's interesting actually. There is no visible sign of a parting mark on the tooling, so it looks really nice and really crisp, almost to the point where there is quite a weight to this. And I don't actually know whether that boiler is made of metal or made of plastic, and I suppose that is testament to how well the finish is on this locomotive, that it's actually really hard to tell which bits are metal and which bits are plastic. We've got the heaped lump of coal, and really Hornby are getting in their stride. It's not quite as good as the lump of coal which I drew your attention to in the B17 video, but certainly it looks far more natural than the artificial plastic lumps of coal that we've seen in the past from manufacturers. So that is actually quite nice, and out of the box it doesn't strike me as being particularly in desperate need of any further detailing with crushed up real coal. The detail in the cab is nicely picked out, and I'm just going to try and hold them apart. I don't know whether that's going to get picked up easily enough on the video, but you can see all the tender fittings are picked out there really nice and crisply in the cab, and that really does add a nice bit of detail. I'm not sure whether the tender fall plate, I don't think it moves, but certainly that tender fall plate is a separately applied piece, and it's probably not the most difficult to actually relocate that so that it can be modelled in the down position, but I'm going to leave it be. The real locomotives, they were never intended for hauling passenger trains. They were never fitted with train brakes. These would have been seen trundling around with unfitted mineral trains, so they only had the locomotive brakes, so there's no steam pipes or vacuum pipes to be seen front and back. Now I've had this locomotive running, and what I can report about this is, even though it's not practical at the moment for us to show video footage of this running, but it will come in a later video where we do some trains going by with some of the more recent things that we've reviewed. Its pulling power was not as great as the Bachmann G2A 080, which is probably a comparable locomotive in terms of wheel arrangement, size and weight in model form. But certainly from what people have said is the more that you run it, there appears to be a shiny coating or plating on the main drive wheels, which I'm told once it starts to wear a little bit, the grip from this locomotive does increase. That said, it's very sure-footed. It does run well through even most intricate and complicated point work. It goes around some tight gradients as well, really well. The modelling of the valve gear and the the pistons and the slide bars is again very crisp and detailed, and you can see there the fluting of the rods is very, very well done. And with a lot of these locomotives where there's no really complicated valve gear to be seen, it can quite easily become quite monotonous, but this has been very, very well done. The long overhang at the front has been faithfully reproduced. It does make it look a little bit odd on very tight train set curves, but it's something that's not as bad as you might have thought. We get a good visualisation of daylight underneath the boiler. I suspect the motor must be somewhere in the firebox or even pressed into the boiler with a gear chain running down through the firebox possibly. I haven't really investigated the innards of this locomotive, so I don't know, but as it runs really, really well, I can't see any need to delve about inside there. All in all, I have to say, for a much requested model, Hornby have done a superb job. Now, originally, I was interested in a North Eastern Railway liveried version of this. There would be some differences between this and an earlier pre-1923 version, not least because the originals went through an evolution over time. And one of the things that did change was they got replacement boilers, which meant that the dome on the top of the boiler there moved about a foot on the real one. So it wouldn't be easily possible to backdate this. DJ Models did announce their own version of this shortly before Hornby announced theirs, but Hornby was much further advanced, and there was a lot of debate at the time as to whether these models could go head to head. DJ Models decided to cut their losses at the cab stage and bowed out. And actually, I have to say that even though the competition stood to one side, Hornby still haven't skimped on any of the development, and what has come out from this is an exceptionally good model. I do hope in the future that they consider backdating it to a pre-updated outward appearance so that it could be used to model pre-1923 liveries. At the moment, a lot of the pre-grouping liveries do seem to be coming to the fore, and as I've said before, I'm a bit of a sucker for them. But overall, I would say there's a good solid 9 out of 10 for this locomotive. Particular points which I cannot praise more highly: an absence of a parting line down the boiler, which unfortunately has become something that, whilst it seems to fade on newer models and is much better done, and on older models it can be quite prominent. On this, there's not a trace of it. And also special attention to the new grade of plastic that they've used to model some of the detail on the brakes that allows adding those extra details in to be a doddle rather than a chore. Anyway, I hope this video has been really useful to you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel too, and keep up to date on new videos as they come up. And also have a look back through. We've got over 260 videos now, so there's plenty there to go on back through. But until then, that's me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take very good care of yourself, and bye for now.